Hello. Even I can hear me. Comes from the late words from the late Von Ogden Vogt. Before the wonders of life, we acknowledge our failures to see, to revere. Before the sanctities of life, we're ashamed of our disrespect and indignities. Before the gift of life, we own that we have made choices of lesser goods. And here today, we seek the gifts of the Spirit. Before the heroisms of life, we would be enlarged to a new devotion. And we are now going to light the candle. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, and to serve you.
We can go into the spoken affirmation.
Okay,
So while you're over here, if we could put it up here on the pulpit,
we can.
will that work?
That's fine.
Are you having Dawson come up and read?
When a person does someone else's order of service, which they've seen passively and didn't pay a good deal of attention to, which of course I've seen passively and give you my word, have not paid a good deal of attention to. Inevitably, when you go through it, it's like going down a path that has boulders and stones and quicksand and, well, the noted absence of light. And so if you will be so kind as to bear with me, I would deeply appreciate it, because I will promise to stumble through and do the best I think I can until I come to the part I know and I understand and I will feel no qualm in doing. And at that point, if I fall then, knock me flat. Because that's not where I should ever stumble. We have come to the time we've lit the chalice, and we're going to light the peace candle. And may indeed find that at this time in our lives, which is extremely difficult and problematic with everything that is going on, that peace become our living resident now in the days, months, and years to come. So be it. Will you join me in our spoken affirmation, please? Please rise. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to lead the truth in freedom, and to help one another. Thank you. You may be seated. Our opening thought comes from a poem written by Ralph Waldo Emerson, a poem that in high school I had pinned to the headliner of my car, not knowing who Ralph Waldo Emerson was. Illusion works impenetrable, weaving webs innumerable. Her gay pictures never fail, crowd on each other, veil on veil. Charmer, who would be believed by humanity who thirsts to be deceived. And our second thought comes from the writings of Northrop Frye. Also appropriate for what we're going to be doing this morning. Reading from a passage in biblical and classical myths. The fall of man is described very obliquely in the book of Genesis. There are two trees, we are told, a tree of life and a tree of knowledge. According to the principle of metaphor, they are clearly the same tree. The forbidden tree has a cursed serpent crawling limply away from it on its belly. And as the serpent is frequently a sexual or phallic symbol, one would expect that the tree of life, in the original version of the story, would have had an erect serpent climbing through its branches, as it still does in certain symbolic systems, such as those of Kundalini Yoga in India. Elsewhere, too, the serpent is a symbol of wisdom, so that the knowledge that humanity gained by the fall through the subtle course of knowledge, which was something to do with the discovery of sex as we know it, because soon as this knowledge was acquired, Adam and Eve knew that they were naked and looked for clothing. Thus, the original unfallen state is apparently conceived as being a sexual ideal of the kind that we have since lost key to. So be the second reading. It is time for the song, our hymn, number 290, Bring, O Past Your Honor.
us your honor. Bring, O time, your harvest, golden sheaves of hallowed lives and minds by truth made free. Come, you faithful spirits, builders of this temple, to holiness, to love and liberty. Ringing glad thanksgiving, bell of grief and gladness, forth to town and prairie let our festal greeting go. Voices long departed in your tones re-echo. Praise to the highest, peace to all below. Shine of frontier courage, sign eye of its vision, home and hearth of common quest for life's immortal good. Stand in years uncoming, sentinel of conscience, pass through the past, your stalwart walls have stood. Church of pure reformers, pioneers undaunted, company of comrades sworn to keep the spirit free. Long o'er life's swift river, preach the eternal gospel, faith, hope, and love for all humanity.
The time has come for us to pause for a moment of meditation. There was a portion in my life when I found one of the more interesting worship services to go to was that of the Quakers. And as a Quaker, we would go into what was a completely silent meeting for one whole hour. My 12-year-old son didn't care for it. But I found it was rather remarkable. I would invite you all for this period of time to place both of your feet on the floor. Place your hands either in your lap or on your legs. Close your own eyes. And take the thoughts that race around your head, and we all talk to ourselves constantly. And tell yourself not to talk. Sit quietly and merely listen. Dismiss the sound of the train outside. Dismiss the sound of my voice and listen quietly. We have another reading from the Unitarian Universalist Purpose and Principles, which we are reconsidering for the second time since the founding of the movement when Unitarian and Universalist merged. The living tradition we share draws from many sources. Direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces that create and uphold life. The words and deeds of prophetic men and women, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Wisdom from the world's traditions which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life. Jewish and Christian traditions which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against the idolatries of the spirit. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote
the inherent worth and dignity of every person,
Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations.
A free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large.
The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
I decided this morning that I wanted to talk about the first one. The only one I've ever had any problem with at all. Well, that's not quite true. I mean, if you want to be a pickpuss, which I can be with great finesse, you can find little niggling problems here and there. And niggling problems are important. Usually it's these little niggling problems we face that it's hard to understand, hard to explain. You ask somebody to explain a little niggling problem, they give you a superficial gloss. This is what it means, and you say, oh, and you walk on, and the problem's never been solved. Niggling problems, when you finally solve them, there is usually something like an iceberg under the water for which the niggling problem was only the tip. And when you find out what the iceberg has to say, it transforms everything totally. Everything you knew before falls apart, and it all has to be rebuilt. So take niggling problems seriously. In our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, I have a problem. Why do we have that? Well, we have that principle, and it's very important. I really ultimately have no problem with the principle per se. But the reason we have that is because we had century upon century upon century of understanding what is the nature of humanity. And this statement is indeed a statement about the nature of what it means to be human. And it says of all of us, we have inherent worth and dignity. Well, what could be the alternative? We are prone to sin, and that continually. Because of the fall of humanity, the Spirit of God was withdrawn from man. We were deprived of the Spirit, and therefore, generation by generation by generation by generation, we are depraved. We are prone to sin, and that continually. And you know what happens if you're prone to sin and that continually and you don't do something about it? Well, you get to go to hell. Now, some of that sounds all right because that way you can see all your friends. But you know what that says about human nature? It says intrinsically, down inside, you are nothing short of rotten. Through to the core. And a society will set up a series of standards. Here are the standards to which you will abide. And if you do not abide, we will criticize you. We will not only criticize you, we will ostracize you. We will punish you. We will make life difficult for you. So come to church and get the problem solved, and don't forget the offering plate.
Amen.
The whole point of the idea of saying there is inherent worth and dignity in human beings is to take a look at that anthropology of how rotten we are as human beings and turn it on its head. Because there is, if you follow that anthropology, this difficulty in explaining how is it so many people who have no idea this whole doctrine of salvation, how is it there can be people doing such good things? How can they do that? Don't they know they're rotten? Well, the humanist portion of our tradition affirms the worth and dignity. However, if you'll notice, my title this morning is not worth and dignity. It is the dignity of worth. I'm going to share with you briefly why I have a problem with not only the old anthropology about how rotten you really are, but the anthropology that is contained in our statement. It wasn't that way originally, and that it is not the case in Judaism that they hold to this idea of original sin and inherited depravity at the creation, the story of the eating of the apple and so on, and humanity fell. And when we fell, from generation to generation, that fallen state was there. That's not present in Judaism. What happens instead, things go kind of bad, so they create a new covenant. Things go kind of bad, so they create another new covenant. Things go kind of bad, so they create the final new covenant. And today we have all the Abrahamic religions. Judaism, Christianity, Islam. But there is no fall of man. Quite the contrary. When we talk about humanity, we come up with a whole different concept. We owe it to Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, who came up with the doctrine that the Orthodox Church, Catholic or Protestant, in Christian tradition, holds. And we are required to believe that if we are Orthodox. Have any of you noticed we're in a Unitarian Universalist congregation? Are you aware that we are the only denomination that we know of that is named after two doctrines and we're non-creedal? We're non-creedal. named after two doctrines. One of the doctrines is the Trinitarian formula. We're Unitarian. The other doctrine is you solve that problem of the fall of humanity by going through the necessary ritual your denomination requires, and then you get to go to no, we're universalists. Another doctrine. We believe, following the universalist tradition, we don't have a doctrine of hell because it's not in there. That humanity lives before a loving God, and therefore that's no longer an issue. Unitarian Universalists. Well, you know, I still have a problem with the anthropology. You see, inherent worth, I don't have a problem with inherent worth. But you know what I think? I think you can make choices that bring circumstances about that cause you to devalue yourself in relationship to how you perceive yourself and how others perceive you. Can you think of anything that you see in the news from day to day, week to week, and month to month that causes you to bring to question the worth that's going on there? Worth can be inherent. Dignity requires some action. Worth can be calculated on a ledger. Dignity requires some action. How you live, what you do, how you make choices, how you deal with others will determine the dignity of how you live your life and how you will be perceived. Dignity is not a static gift. It is something that happens in a process. Worth can be calculated by dollars and cents, and it can be locked in time. But dignity is something you do. You do dignified things. You speak honestly. You speak with care. You look after what happens with other people. You find out where there is need and how you might be the one who can fill it. What does it take to help someone, to support someone, to mutually get together and make life work, both for you and others, so that when you're done, you can give each other a hug and be very grateful for what just took place. And then you can look at it and say, that was a dignified response to a very deep and definite need. Dignity is something we earn. Dignity is something you do. Love is something you do. The feelings of love are the result of your doing. The acceptance of what has happened, if you do dignified things, is the fact that dignified things have been done and there is mutual agreement. I believe if we proactively choose to live our lives in such a way that we serve those around us and at the same time serve us, it's almost impossible to serve others and not serve yourself as well. That we then make real inherent worth and dignity in the lived outness of our lives. You know, we don't actually stand in too strange a group of people when we affirm that. It may not in any way, shape, or form affirm original sin and inherited depravity, But if we would step back 2,500 years and wipe out everything you know about science, humanities, all that knowledge, and put yourself back in a mythical worldview, the inherent worth and dignity can be translated into ancient Hebrew with the following phrase. And God said, let us make humanity in our own image. And in the image of God, God created them. Inherent worth and dignity, image of God. If you lived in the ancient world, it's translatable. That's who you are when you choose. And having said all that, I've said enough, probably a little too much. One of the things I always do, not always, most of the time. Any of you got anything to say? Any questions? Any answers I can find the questions for? Any disagreements you wish to make? Anything you wish to stand up and object to? We haven't had the offering yet, so you can't leave.
I had a problem with the first principle for quite a long time, because when I would look at some people in our politics, I'm thinking of one individual in particular, but I won't mention his name. I didn't see how I could see worth and dignity in that person, because he didn't seem to see it in other people. And the only way I could find worth in him was to think of him as he must once have been, a small child, unsure of himself, looking to see what the world meant and so forth. We're all in that position at one time, and that's the way I can see worth in him.
Thank you. I think we can very easily choose to behave and live in such a manner we destroy our value. And that's something I think we need to pay close attention to. Others?
Hello. I got a question for you.
Go.
So I'm still pretty new here.
Me too.
What are the principles of the Unitarian Universalist Church?
That is, in fact, what we read when we were reading. The 7 people who stood up or read with the microphone, they were reading our principles. I think I can read them very quickly because if I'm not mistaken, I should have them right here. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Don't forget meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. The respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. That's it.
I really love that. I just want to say, I don't want to go on a speech or anything, but it makes me want to continue coming here. I've told people I'm a Discordian witch. I'm a pagan. I grew up Christian. I rejected Christianity completely. I grew up being raised a bigot. And I had a lot of problems within myself, and it was actually the Army that helped me fix myself. And I only came here originally 3 weeks ago on a whim. Somebody had said, hey, there's something called cups or whatever, and they were in, I think, New Mexico. And they had said that It was something to do with paganism, and so we started talking about it on our Discord because I'm a part of a pagan community, and we had quite a few of our LGBTQ members telling us, "Oh, it's great. We love that place. Like we don't, they don't really. A lot of them don't go anymore, but they love the place." And I really think, as someone who's like 26, young, growing up in this really weird time, it's not terrible time. It's just weird. I believe in what y'all are doing.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you for your words. And welcome. Welcome. I've been around here, not here. I'm new here like you are. I've been around Unitarian Universalism for a long time. I'd like to say since Dirt was young, but Dirt was young a lot sooner than I got around. So, but when I hit the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Long Beach, California, I found home. Others, statements, objections, corrections.
I was also raised in a Christian atmosphere, and what gets me is our very first principle refers to the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And yet, quote, Christianity seems to find more and more ways to disregard that in the way they treat other people. And that's something that has basically driven me away from them. And I find that the Unitarian Universalists living that tradition are so much better placed to be good people. That's not to say everybody isn't or is, but on the whole, I find UUs are just really living their traditions.
Hopefully that's true.
Yeah.
And I want to add something to what you just said. I am not in any way, shape, or form anti-Christian. I want to be crystal clear about that. I don't care what the religious movement is. You can have a spectrum of views and beliefs within that movement, from ultra-fundamentalist to ultra-liberal. And as you go from one end to the other, you move from a closed worldview that knows the beginning of history and the end of history and everything in between to a group of people who look at the open-endedness of the future, see the open-endedness of the past, and see the need for us to interrelate to one another in our spiritual beliefs and so on. The bulk of Christianity does not have the problem of the closed worldview. Orthodoxies do to a certain extent, but even Orthodox movements today are open and willing to entertain. For instance, the Episcopal Church is an Orthodox church. It's Anglican Catholic. That's Orthodox. However, a Unitarian can be an Episcopal minister today. That means that the church is open in its understanding. Islam can be open in its understanding. All of them can be open in their understanding. It is the closed fundamentalists that will inevitably generate the problem. And by the way, a fundamentalist Christian, a fundamentalist Jew, or a fundamentalist movement can't tolerate the rest of their people either. It is the way it is. But I want you to know, I'm not anti-anybody. I believe the Spirit moves us in various ways. The Spirit's wonders to perform. Others. No others? In that case, I want to thank you for the opportunity of sharing with you today. And thank you for your participation in the conversation. I have always preferred, I don't believe any minister should stand up and speak and be the only one that gets to say anything. We need to be contradicted and put in our places now and then. We need to be challenged.
Thank you, Byron.
You're welcome. We have come to a time for giving. You'll note I earlier brought up the offering plate. There are many ways we can give to this congregation, and the vast bulk of the ways we give is through our own pledges and generosities, and they take place in areas and in ways other than in this service. If you don't know it by now, we do not pass a plate, but we give you the opportunity to light candles for hopes, wishes, dreams, and prayers, and also to grant offering to our offering plate. Please. Our closing benediction. Finally, my brothers and sisters, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. So be it. We take this time to extinguish our chalice, and will you join me in the phrase on the board? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These carry in our hearts till we are together again. So be it.